And look at like 37%.
Okay. So that's, you already
I got
grabbed
mine.
it.
Oh wait, what about this?
Yeah.
I thought you came back to me.
I think you gave me your new stuff. Okay, cool. Okay. So anything exciting in the news today?
French election next week.
Yes. And the, basically the Trump candidate, which was Le Pen, did not win. Of all the attacks, he was the guy who was screaming for better defense of France, and he ends up losing. The other guy, Bones is back. What does that mean? The guy, Macron ends up winning. So even with all the attacks, Paris is so liberal that 90% of them vote for the weaker candidate in the sense of defense basis. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But heck, what, Hillary got 40-some% of the vote here still, and she was clearly the weak candidate. That's probably the biggest news. I'm sure that will be a defeat for Trump. They will play it off as this is evident that the world, after 100 days of Trump, the world did not want anybody else that's similar to him. So, of course, then, the other one that I thought was interesting is Rand Paul. That they're actually saying that they might have been spying on him as well during the election. So, and then the one that's really scary is there's a guy. Oh, they took it down. This was up there. Where'd it go? Oh, so you guys know what an EMP is? Anybody know what an EMP? You guys know what an EMP is? An EMP is a nuclear blast that's up in the atmosphere. What it does is it actually shorts out anything electrical. All computers, all phones, all cell towers, all, even your power to your house, gone, destroyed.
Basically, it kills people.
No, it doesn't kill anybody.
But if they get rid of the electronics, then
Well, yes, some of you will die of withdrawal from not having cell phones ability. Your cars won't work unless it's a classic old one that doesn't run on computers, then that will run. But all of the newer vehicles that are all computer controlled, of course, die. There's a solution. Anybody ever hear of a Faraday cage? You know what a Faraday cage is? It is actually used. These are pretty cool. Show some images of this. So a Faraday cage actually prevents electricity from it passes electricity and stuff around you. And actually, it's kind of cool. Guys who work with the big electrical lines and stuff like that, they will actually wear a Faraday suit. So what they do is they actually take and they hook the Faraday suit to the electrical, and so the current is passing on this suit around them as they're working with these high voltage lines, which is kind of freaky. Some of them say it makes that they can feel the electricity, but it doesn't hurt them, but it makes their hair stand on end and stuff like that. It's kind of cool. But actually what you can do is you can actually have create your own Faraday cage and basically save your own electronics if you wanted to. So it'll protect, here's one. Somebody came up with a Faraday bag. So basically, you put your phone in there, and then of course, what does it matter when the entire internet's down in the United States and everything else is gone? What does it matter if you have a phone or not, right? So,
At least you have a camera to record it.
yeah, but you won't, how will you recharge it unless I guess you could buy a solar charger system and charge it over and over. But, yeah, there's a number of places. Here's one. Faraday cage for your cat. And
It's so cute.
then, what was it, the Faraday suit? Yeah, that was pretty cool. Yeah, see, here's the guys working on the high power. So they actually, when they're working on it, they ground themselves. There's so much power coming on there that it actually jumps across to their device. So that's why they have to worry about it. It's pretty cool. I was watching I think it was like Modern Marvels or something like that, where they actually, guys, the high tension lines, rather than bringing up a truck and helicopters. Guy sits off the edge of the helicopter comes in, flies right next to the line, the guy reaches out, grounds them in the helicopter to the power line, does the work that he needs to, detaches from the power line, and they fly away. Now that's some pretty good skills on the pilot's part for flying that helicopter. So, but that's supposed to have been saving a lot of money on being able to service a lot of these high power lines that you see on those big towers, and stuff, so. But that's what an EMP will do when they say there's 2 North Korean satellites that are flying above the United States that are in the perfect orbit trajectory for just doing an EMP assault on the United States. Now, just so you know, I've been hearing about EMP attack on the United States since the 1990s, if not before. So this is not something new, and this is not something where we go, oh, I'm gonna be scared, we're gonna lose everything. The chances of something like this, and it's North Korea, the chances of this being successful are very slim. I mean, come on, they haven't gotten the missile off the ground in a while. I wouldn't necessarily worry about it so much, but it was an interesting article. Some professor was talking about it. Of course, last week, Trump passed a executive order, it was a couple weeks ago on banning sanctuary cities. You know, he said that if you're a sanctuary city, you weren't going to get any federal funding. Well, a judge came out and ruled that that's unconstitutional. Well, Texas has decided that they're going to sign sanctuary city ban into law. So that basically what they're going to say in Texas, they've said you cannot have a sanctuary city. So Texas has taken the step to ban sanctuary cities on their own, not waiting. So we'll see that come probably before court as well. Ooh, this would be military space plane lands more than 700 days in space. That's pretty cool.
You now know the loud noise that left many Central Floridians scratching their heads yesterday morning was a sonic boom from the Air Force's secret space plane. The X-37B touched down yesterday morning at the Kennedy Space Center. And we know the plane had been in orbit for nearly 2 years, but the Air Force still won't tell us exactly what it's been doing up there. Only that the plane was testing reusable spacecraft technologies. Boeing recently announced KSC would be the home of this mysterious military program. A lot of reusable things, you know, we watched them move the, rocket up and down.
That's right. Yeah, SpaceX launches the moon. Yeah, but that I didn't hear that.
No, I slept right through that.
But people, as far as
I sleep
Chulio,
though, I'm surprised I slept through.
I mean, Metro West, I saw some people commenting that they heard it.
They heard
Metro West St. Cloud.
So, you guys know what a sonic boom is, right?
Kind of like when you break the sound barrier.
Correct. Creates a boom. There's some pretty cool getting sidetracked, but, there's one out there, there's a really cool image. That's not quite the
Yeah,
sonic boom I was looking for.
I used to play that game on my phone. Yeah, but that's like a Cartoon Network show I heard about.
Yeah, so this is one of the cool ones. That's actually, the vapor cone that shows up when they break that sound barrier. It's only there for a split second, so it's like, but it's like really cool. You can see, one side, no, this side, yes, faster than the speed of sound. But they're actually forbidden for flying, doing sonic booms over the United States because it can really cause, maybe, well, that and also could also cause people on the ground. It rattles windows. Anybody see the movie 13 Hours? If you want to see a good movie about the Benghazi attack, is you watch the movie 13 Hours. It's about the attack on the U.S. Embassy in Lebanon and how these guys, about really 4 to 6 guys, former military guys that were working there, fended off hundreds of insurgents coming in and trying to take them out, and how they defended. And they kept calling. All they wanted was the military to send over a plane to do a sonic boom over the area, just because it would put the fear of God in these people. But they, of course, this is a big thing that I think one of the things that cost Hillary the election was the movie, because you watch that, you just. I remember the first time I watched it, I'm thinking, wow, these guys are amazing. Then at the same time, I'm getting just absolutely frosted that Obama and Hillary were watching this going on and didn't do anything. Or actually, I think they said Obama went to bed. These guys are fighting all through the night, trying to stay alive, to try to save our ambassador. The ambassador was killed. And yeah, it's quite an interesting story. So, but other than that, not much. Trump's budget. The House voted to repeal Obamacare. Of course, I don't think it's going to pass the Senate, but then hopefully the Senate will come up with their bill and they'll do something in reconciliation in the House with the House and at least get some sort of change in this. I'm not a big fan, actually, of the replacement that they're coming up with out of the House. Some of these changes they want to make are not helpful. Government just needs to get out of healthcare. They actually make it worse. Anything else from you guys in the news? Those were the kind of the stories that struck me over the last week. Anybody have any conversations over the Obamacare's repeal at your house? No.
I try to stay away from politics in my house because they're all terrible.
They give me crazy.
All terrible conversations.
Why, do you guys get in like arguments?
No, I just hate talking about politics
Oh,
in my house. Because once you start, my dad doesn't stop.
Oh.
Yeah, and
Talk
my
to your
grandma.
dad
Oh my
and your
gosh.
grandma.
My grandma.
Grandpa, okay.
Except my grandma's actually hilarious when he talks about it. It's so entertaining to me.
Oh, it's.
Because he's like, well, back in my day, blah, 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 blah. It's so funny.
Well, it's interesting, if you watch the movie No Country for Old Men, one of the comments that we had talking about the movie afterwards was how the old guys were basically looking back at the past and being nostalgic of the past. They were almost making it that it was more perfect than what it was today, and that today is just the same as what it used to be. And I'm like, I don't know if I would say that's the case. I mean, we haven't had terrorist attacks on U.S. soil before, 9/11. We had some issues, but nothing like what we've had in the past. And the number of, school shootings has gone up. A lot of other things that happen, it just seems like it's higher today than what it had been in the past.
On the other hand, there aren't as many Indian attacks or.
Right, but that was back when the Indians were around.
True.
And
For
were
some
more
reason,
prevalent.
Indians are like the baseball team. What are you saying?
Well, they haven't been very good lately either.
Oh.
But, so it just depends. Things change, but in many respects, they're the same. But there's also, I do think society is getting worse, actually. It's not necessarily getting better. Okay, let's see, that's the last one. We did that one. Oh, one of the things that I noticed that the book said, and I don't know if I stressed enough last time, was the fact that one of your questions, the book basically claimed that tax cuts cause the deficits. Tax cuts do not cause deficits. So saying tax cuts cause deficits is the same way of saying that, well, we're going to have a sale on our iPhones. We're going to take $100 off the iPhone. Well, then they sell 1,000 iPhones. Did they just lose $100,000? Is that really, could you say that they lost $100,000? But the problem is would they have actually sold 100 or that many iPhones? See, that's the thing. Did that $100 off on the iPhone generate more sales, and they actually made more money than had they kept it low? It's the same thing with tax cuts. Cutting taxes generates more economic growth, which therefore would increase the amount of money, tax revenue, to the Treasury. And actually, if you look at it, Reagan cut taxes in the 80s. By the time he left office, because of the economic growth, the tax revenue to the federal government doubled. So you can't say that the problem with the deficits was tax cuts. The problems with the deficits is spending. So it'd be like blaming getting a raise on the reason why you're in debt. We got more money, but we're more in debt. Why? Well, because we spent too much. That's where it's all the issue is about. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys understood that tax cuts, because they're going to start talking about tax cuts again over the summer. And you're going to hear people say, especially from the Democrat Party, going, oh, tax cuts, that's going to cost us money. That's going to cost the government $1 billion or $1 trillion because of the lower taxes. No, that's a lie. That puts the premise that the money that they have is their money. It's not their money. It's our money. They take it from us. The money represents the effort people do to get that money. It is a medium for trade. The government does not own the money. So when they tax you, they're taxing you on your work, is really what they're doing, not your money. So get it through your head, start thinking now, it's not theirs, it's not theirs, it's not theirs. And you want lower taxes, lower taxes, lower taxes. And actually, economically, it works. Because again, like a sale, that's why companies have sales, is so that they can sell more of a product. The same thing, government, when they cut taxes, they generate economic growth. When there's more economic growth, there's more money they collect in taxes, even though it's at a lower rate. It was proven recently too the government cut capital gains tax rates from 30%, I think it was 30%, might have been 28, down to like 15. Well, that they're like, well, that's not fair. That only benefits the rich because only the rich have stocks and investments. No. If your parents have a pension, if your parents have a 401k or whatever those retirement, they have money in that. And so when the government cuts that, it stimulates the economy, which is why one of the reasons I think that the stock market is at the level that it's at, that the high that it's at currently, is because the lower capital gains rates. People are more willing to invest. The other thing is of course, lower interest rates in your bank makes it so that you want to invest. The only place you can invest really is in stocks, bonds, or those kinds of things. So that's another reason. So again, just get it through your head, lower taxes, lower taxes, lower taxes. Okay, 1993 through 2010. I think last week I mentioned to you that Bill Clinton, the reason why he got elected because he was the cool president. And I had the show wrong. It was the Arsenio Hall show. And Bill Clinton played the saxophone on the Arsenio Hall. And everybody's like, oh, this is awesome. He's great. He's the greatest, the coolest president ever. Let's vote for him. Okay. And yeah, unfortunately we did. So then some of the things that he did is the Family Medical Leave Act, which got him really that and the healthcare reform. So Bill Clinton gets in office and basically, just like it was kind of funny because I said the same thing was going to happen to Obama, is that Bill Clinton gets into office and all of a sudden to the Democrats, this is a referendum that we can do everything that we want to do and change. Now, Bill Clinton, the thing about Bill Clinton that I do like is that Bill Clinton just liked being president. Why? Because then he could get more chicks. And so he could use that to get more women, whereas, but Hillary is actually an activist and a radical. So the Healthcare Reform Act that she does, and she has these secret meetings to put together the healthcare reform, and it fails under Hillary. Passed under Obama, but failed under Hillary. Because again, with liberals, they may try something and fail, and they're not like conservatives who go, okay, well, the people have spoken, we can't get this through, move on. They come back, even if it's 10 years later, and get it passed again. And in this case, it was pretty much almost 20 years later that they actually pass it. So they overreach, and what happens is the Republicans come out with the Contract with America, which of course the Democrats relabel as Contract on America. But the Contract with America, masterminded by Newt Gingrich, basically stated this is the things that we're going to do in the first 100 days we get into office, and they listed all these things that they were going to work to pass, and they passed actually the majority of them. Now, not all of them got signed, but a lot of them did, and this is mainly because the victory by the Republicans is the overreach of Bill Clinton and the Clinton administration, and the Republicans take advantage of this. They end up taking control of the House for the first time since for over 60 years, since the 1930s. It's the first time they take control of the House of Representatives. And some of the things, of course, that Newt Gingrich gets pushed through is Defense of Marriage Act, Welfare Reform Act of '96. And what really helps a lot of this, though, is Dick Morris, who is one of Bill Clinton's chief advisors, Dick Morris is now a conservative and very much helps a lot of Republicans get reelected because he saw what was going on and saw where the Democrats were going and decided to change sides. He actually convinced Bill Clinton to go along with a lot of what the Republicans were doing. The reason why if Bill wanted to get reelected in 96, then he had to work with the Republicans and do some of these things because his popularity had slipped. Well, the Republicans put up Bob Dole, who, of course, horrible candidate, great man, horrible candidate, and which is kind of funny. Bob Dole is like, back then he was like in his 90s practically, it seemed like. After the election, shortly after the election, he was started doing Viagra ads, and everybody's like, no, really?
What's Viagra for?
You can ask your dad. But the thing is he started doing things that's just like, you just shake your head at and go, what are you thinking, Bob? And he was a horrible candidate. The only good thing about his candidacy is he had a guy by the name of Jack Kemp, former football player, as his VP. And Jack Kemp's probably one of the brightest congressmen that we've had in a long time. In fact, what he devised is a way of revitalizing the cities. He called them economic enterprise zones. So what Kemp wanted to do, and just absolutely, like I said, absolutely brilliant, he wanted to go into the inner cities and actually make it more economical for lower income people to create their own businesses in their areas of town and create and stimulate the economy in these areas. Whereas, of course, many in the inner city many of the politicians don't really want the inner city to get better. Why? Because the inner city continues to vote for welfare and vote for people who will help them rather than people that will really help them, like a Jack Kemp. Unfortunately, Jack Kemp has passed away a number of years ago and is no longer there. And you don't hear a lot of these ideas that he had about these enterprise zones. But it was really a brilliant idea that he tried to do. It worked in some of these areas. And in fact, what I find interesting, the mayor of Akron, really, if you look at what they're trying to do with the city of Akron and these apartment buildings that they're building inside the downtown area, the renovation that they're removing of the inner belt, which I'm kind of disappointed in. But that's all about reinvigorating the downtown area of Akron. And so really, Mayor Kliswalik started this, but the new mayor is currently passing these same ideas that Jack Kemp had, who was a Republican, of reinvesting back into the inner city. So we'll see, well, of course, we'll see what happens in about 10 years, what the city of Akron looks like when they get through with all of this stuff. So Bill Clinton, of course, ends up winning re-election. Some of the problems that he has is, of course, the Balkans. The problem with the Balkans, remember World War I? World War I started pretty much in the Balkans. So you look at the problem with the Balkans is you have all of these different nationalities and groups all in this area, and so they don't get along. During the 90s, we had the war in, you had the Croatia, Serbia. My brother actually had the 82nd Airborne. He was over in those areas fighting. This was a case when we actually were fighting for the Muslims in the Balkans area. And because the Christians and the Muslims were fighting, and Bill Clinton decided we needed to side with the Muslims and stop the Christians from killing all the Muslims. Well, a lot of what was going on was this was a war between the two, and I think in this case again we may have chose the wrong side. We probably just should have stayed out. It's one of those things where we shouldn't have gotten involved in. But of course, the media was showing these atrocities of the Christians bombing the Muslims and little babies being killed. Kind of reminds you of what happened just recently in Syria. and how we attacked Syria, because, again, I don't know if we're on the right side on that one either. So, you have, of course, things that have going on in the Middle East, Israel, Palestine, Palestinians, attacks from, Lebanon and Syria into Israel, and just different things going on in the Middle East. Of course, Monica Lewinsky. Anybody know the Monica Lewinsky? Anybody not know the Monica Lewinsky story? Monica Lewinsky was got in trouble for having sex with President Clinton, actually inside the Oval Office. There's one story out there that actually Bill Clinton is having sex with Monica Lewinsky in the Oval Office while some dignitary is waiting to come in and see the president. Yeah, that's how bad it was. Well, of course, Clinton was impeached, charged with perjury and obstruction of justice. Sound familiar? That's exactly what Nixon did. You want to know what irony is? Irony is the fact that Hillary Clinton, which was actually, I think she was Hillary Rodham at the time, was actually involved in the investigation into Richard Nixon's Watergate. So she was involved in the investigation of Richard Nixon and Watergate, and her husband ended up getting impeached for lying, and becomes one of the other presidents that's going to be impeached. Of course, the problem with it is the House of Representatives vote to impeach. The Senate does not take the case up, and basically there's nothing that happens. Bill Clinton loses his license because he lied under oath, and so lost his law license. I don't know if he got it back yet or not. I don't remember what the terms of how long you would lose it, but that's okay. He's making hundreds of thousands of dollars every time he goes someplace to speak. Just like Obama got $400,000 to go speak to some big time investment company. $400,000 for a speech. Yeah. See, you guys are getting a bargain.
So basically, he got paid that much just to go somewhere and talk to people.
Yes.
That sounds totally awesome.
Mhm. That's what happens when you can become president. The other thing about the big thing is, and this kind of shows where we are today in our mindset, is that he came out in his famous press conference, Bill Clinton did, about Monica Lewinsky, and said, "I never had sex with that woman." Pause. Monica Lewinsky, and he said, "Well, I didn't lie." The sentence ended with, "I never had sex with that woman." And then said Monica Lewinsky. So, the other thing is when he was under oath, they were asked, he goes, "Did you have sex with that woman?" "Well, it depends on what your definition of is." Yeah, that's actually a quote from Bill Clinton. It depends on what your definition of is. How do you answer that as a lawyer? Well, of course, what a definition of it. Did you have, well, it depends. Is that really considered sex? So, yeah, the big thing that everybody always talked about is, and the one thing that Rush commented was, okay, how do you explain this to your 8-year-old child about what's going on when you've got all this stuff and you got this, "Mommy, what does this mean? What is President Clinton in trouble for?" Well, Johnny.
You gotta keep
Yeah.
your creativity.
So then, of course, we have the election of 2000, and Bush coins the phrase "compassionate conservative." Again, history repeats itself. Sounds a lot like, and I think I mentioned this, Eisenhower. When Eisenhower ran, he had this idea of, conservatism, or trying to remember, I can't remember the phrase that he called it. But again, things really, in essence, don't change. If you understand history, you can see that a lot of this stuff is just the same recycled old junk. So Bush runs on this idea of compassionate conservatism. Really, Bush gets the nomination for the presidency. Senator John McCain from Arizona, was actually leading after the first couple of elections during the primary when him and Bush were running. And what happened is everybody looked at McCain and go, oh my gosh, no. So everybody basically united, the voters united behind Bush to give Bush the nomination over McCain, because McCain was horrible. And not a lot of people like him. You get outside of Arizona and McCain is not liked very much. I don't like him. I think he's conniving all about himself. And there's some really funny parodies by Rush on the whole thing, on John McCain. He's like, we're going to change course, left, 360 degrees. But, Senator, we'll be going in the same direction. Yes, but they won't know that. So he makes fun of McCain and a lot of these things. He had some really great parodies during this election time of McCain. But the big thing is you got the Florida recount. In 2000, what happens is the vote is so close that Bush barely wins Florida and ends up winning the election. Well, the election got called a little earlier than what it was supposed to, and Al Gore basically concedes the election, then calls Bush back and changes his mind. So they filed for a lawsuit in Florida to try to get the Florida vote out. Because if Florida is out, then Gore has enough has more electoral votes than Bush, and basically they could say that, well, Gore wins because he had more electoral votes, but he wouldn't have had the required number to win the election. Bush barely does with Florida. And so what they did is Al Gore goes to the Florida Supreme Court and demands a recount. I think the vote difference was around 3,000 votes is all Bush wins Florida by. So they demand a recount. Well, so they do this recount by hand. So the Florida, the thing is that Al Gore asked for a recount of only 3 counties. Broward, Dade, and Palm Beach counties. The 3 biggest Democrat counties in Florida. That's Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach cover basically from Miami all the way up to West Palm Beach area, which is very, very much, which includes Fort Lauderdale. They're very liberal areas of the country, or the state. And so the hope is that he can get enough votes to actually win the election. Well, the Florida Supreme Court basically says, yes, do this, blah, blah, blah. The Florida Secretary of State's like, no, the election's done, it's certified, we don't need a recount, it doesn't meet the statutes. The Florida Supreme Court's like, yes. The Florida House and Senate vote to authorize the Secretary of State to, give the state to Bush. The Florida Supreme Court comes back and says, no, we're going to do a recount. So all this time, Bush is there, the election's in limbo for weeks as this is going on. Finally, the U.S. Supreme Court gets involved and basically goes back to the Florida Supreme Court and goes, you are violating laws here. Do it. You have to follow the law. You cannot just make up these things because you're siding with Al Gore. The thing is, to this day, Democrats will say that 9 justices on the U.S. Supreme Court, basically it wasn't 9, it was a 5-4 decision. So 5 justices on the U.S. Supreme Court gave the election to President Bush. He was illegitimate. Sound familiar? Not, well, this election it's not the Supreme Court. The Russians gave the election to Trump. He's an invalid or not the real president. Therefore, we don't have to follow what he wants to do. Again, history just continues to repeat itself. And George W. Bush, the things that you have to remember, in this election, Gore never wins a final recount, because they do a final recount. And the famous thing was hanging chads. So what they used to do is you used to have a card and you punch the card. And when you were done with punching the card, you would make sure that all of your items were punched. You couldn't have, if the thing was not fully detached, vote didn't count. Well, Al Gore tried to have a bunch of votes thrown out and more of his thrown in, and based on how the chad was hanging. So the big thing came out, hanging chads, which is one of the reasons why we really pushed quickly to do the electronic ballots and not the paper ballots anymore where you punch. But yeah, it was huge. The nightly news was filming these people going through and putting them in stacks of which paper ballot was for Gore, which one was for Bush. And then they would show, oh, look, hanging chad, come over, gotta inspect, put it over in this pile. And so, yeah, it was hilarious the whole time. So the other problem with this, and this kind of leads into the whole 9/11 and Bush getting blamed for 9/11, is that when Bush, because of the election being held in limbo, Bush doesn't get to really start transitioning till sometime in December. And think about it. Most presidents start transitioning shortly after the election's over, which is the second week in November. Bush lost about a month's worth of time to get ready. Now again, they're calling the illegitimate president. And so because of that, his transition team takes a lot longer. The other thing, when Bush, this is how petty some of these liberals are. When the Bush team moves into the White House, finally moves into the White House, the Democrats in the White House, the staff, removed all of the W's off of the keyboard, the computer keyboards. Because of course it was George W. Everybody called him W. So they removed all of the W's off of every keyboard in the White House. And yeah, so of course again now they got to go through and fix things. There are other things that were missing out of the White House. FBI files were missing out of the White House. There's a whole huge lot of scandals that continue to come up, out of the Clinton administration even after Bush becomes president. But being that there's this unwritten rule that the current president doesn't go after the past president, nothing's ever done on any of these issues. Of course, then we have 9/11. The whole, 2 planes flying into the Twin Towers. But of course, that looks like a missile. That's what the conspiracy theories all say is, oh, that was a missile, it wasn't a plane. They were actually demolishing the buildings. So there's the problem that you run into, and this is why I don't really get into conspiracy theories, is because a lot of times what happens with conspiracy theories is that they distract you from the real discussions. The real discussion that we should have been having during this whole time was not whether 9/11 was an inside job, but the fact that because of 9/11, we create a whole new Office of Homeland Security, bigger government, and we create the Patriot Act, which I disagree with both. Why? We already have the FBI. We already have the CIA. Why do we need a Department of Homeland Security? We have the FBI. That's their job. Why do we need a Department of Homeland Security? Why do we need a TSA who takes, a 90-year-old woman who's riding in a wheelchair, we take and confiscate her knitting needles because of the fact she might use them as a weapon. She's 90 years old. Well, maybe the person she's traveling with, they're knitting needles. So we can talk about the fact that after 9/11, we end up with government overreach. Now, a lot of people say that, well, it was an inside job. We blew up the towers because we wanted oil in Iraq and Afghanistan. We haven't gotten a drop of oil from Iraq or Afghanistan. As part of the going in there, we let them keep all their own oil. In fact, this thing has cost us more money than what we've ever gotten out of any of this. Again, because we spend time, people talking about conspiracy theories, we end up not really talking about the real issues and what needs to be covered. So be careful when you see the Boston bomber? Remember that, the Boston Marathon?
Oh, random thing, so my parents were supposed to be running that marathon when it happened. But then I forget, I think one of my parents got hurt or something, and so they didn't. And I was like, okay, that's not terrifying at all. Like, okay, that's cool.
But yeah, I mean, you know, the thing is there's a lot of people who believe that it was one of the SEAL teams actually was responsible for the explosions at the Boston Marathon. And it's like, really? Guys who are sworn to protect American citizens are going to take and put bombs and blow it up, and then blame two kids that have Russian background and are also Muslim, going to blame them for the bombing. Yeah. Again, the conspiracy theories we spend all the time, but the problem is, again, when we look at these things, we don't look at the fact. What scares me the most is when these guys, they're trying to go and find these guys. These police officers are breaking down doors of everybody's house and going into houses without warrants. That is something that we should be concerned about. Not whether, they're supposedly inside job again, and this was the government doing it. But the fact that the government can go in and just knock down your door and go into your house without any true probable cause of coming into your house, other than we think he might be in there. Well, don't you think if he was in there, I would tell you? Well, he might be holding your family hostage. I think I would still tell you in this case. So.
Most funders actually think 9/11 was a.
You think 9/11 was an inside job?
I think so. How do you explain the buildings falling? Perfectly straight down.
Based on, if you look at some of the videos where they were talking about, there's a great documentary out there on how the heating of the stuff would actually cause the floors, the way they were anchored, that they would start to bend under the stress, and then they would snap at the edges. And so then what happens is this floor drops on the floor below it, and what you get is drop, 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 drop. And that's what starts it. And the one documentary that they were showing it, they slow-moed it, and what some people call an explosion is what this other group is saying. No, this is actually, you can see this. This is the floor dropping on the floor below it, because you see these air puffs coming out. And that's what some people will say, no, those are the explosions. Yeah. And others are like, no, this is the air puffs coming out. Besides, I look at it this way. Sometimes the simplest answer is typically the closest answer. I mean, we definitely saw planes flying into it. How would you coordinate the planes flying into it? And I have an architectural friend, Mr. Seifert, who when he saw the planes fly into the building, his comment was, those aren't going to stand. Because he understands the principles and the stress put on the buildings by that. And you can also tell, what also would tell me, if I was going to bring these buildings down by, say, demolition and stuff, wouldn't I brought down the one that got hit first? But the one that falls first is the one that got hit second. Why? Because it got hit in lower area. So there was more weight above it, so when the stress starts to collapse this building on this, because there's more weight above where the impact is, the chances of it coming down fits the record more. So.
Nothing that confuses me as World Trade Center 7.
Yes, but I did see another interesting expose on what happened with World Trade Center 7 is that a lot of gas mains in that building ruptured, and there was a lot of fires in the basement. Again, that weakens the. So here, what he's talking about is World Trade Center 7, which I believe is that building there. And yeah, it's kind of unclear. So you got this whole area here is destroyed. And I think what happens is this building, when it does come down, it comes down a little bit more, not perfectly straight. And so a lot of debris comes down here onto these. I'm trying to remember where the firefighters were, you remember the story of there was Nicolas Cage did a movie about the guys who were in two guys that were rescued from the only two guys to actually be pulled from the rubble were these two guys, and they got pinned in the rubble, but that was mainly because they were in one of these other buildings making their way to the basement of the World Trade Towers, and they ended up when the first building come down and they got trapped. So the other conspiracy is why didn't Bush react when he's getting this story? Why didn't Bush react? You know, he just sits there while these kids are reading. You know, he's at this school and they're doing story time, and these kids are reading and he's listening. And this is when he's being informed that the World Trade Towers have been attacked. And he just sits there, and they're watching this, and he just sits there, and you can tell he's no longer paying attention to the kids reading. He's thinking. It's going through his head. What's going on? What does this mean? And as soon as it's over, he gets up and calmly walks into a room that they set up as a communication point. And there's another really, really great documentary on what happens after this, if you want to watch. They didn't want him going back to Washington. They wanted him in a bunker, safe and away from this. And he forced them to take him back to Washington, D.C. so he could address the public that night.
Did they fly over Atlanta, the Atlantic Ocean? Like how?
Yeah, I think they did. I think they flew. They're in fact, in many respects, they don't. There's a lot of speculation about where they were flying because it was so secretive. The other thing is it was really weird because there are no jets in the sky, so there were no contrails or nothing for a number of days. Everything is shut down. We had a couple of friends, co-workers of mine, I worked for Goodyear at the time. These guys were down in Texas, actually it might have been Oklahoma, and they were scheduled to fly back that day. And the planes all got grounded really quickly, and they were stuck at the airport. So they rented a car. Luckily, they got a car because that's what everybody started doing, is renting cars and driving back to their destinations that they needed to get to. But this pretty much shut down the country for quite a long time. And also, the other thing is, you had I don't have it on here, is the DC sniper. So in Washington, D.C., they have this guy, I think I've talked about it, who was him and this young kid that he talked into it. They were driving up, popping open the trunk of his car or his van and shooting people randomly with his high-powered rifle and killing them. That shut down D.C. That had a huge impact on a lot of business going on. In fact, Bush gets lambasted he comes out after 9/11, he goes, listen, go about your daily lives, go buy things, keep the economy moving. And everybody laughs at him for saying that. He's like, oh, so, and it's like, no, he has a good point here. If we cave to the terror, they won. That's the key, and that's all Bush was trying to say in this instance. You also have Hurricane Katrina, where Bush is accused of blowing up the government's blowing up the levees in New Orleans that flooded all of this inner city areas because all of his rich buddies wanted to go and buy cheap real estate in New Orleans. Well, when it comes to find out, what really happened is that the governor and the mayor of New Orleans had not been spending the money on the repairs of the levees the way they should have been over years, and they were spending the money on their own pet projects so that they get reelected, because nobody wanted really this, a levee is not that big of a deal, but until it fails. And so, unfortunately, Katrina was like the perfect storm. So Katrina comes in with high tide, which causes this huge, massive water flood and erodes, and then it comes over a period of a couple of days, the water becomes so saturated that the levees break, and the flooding of the people is just horrendous. Then, of course, you have the Obama election. Of course, McCain ends up winning the nominee. He picks Sarah Palin, who a number of conservatives blame Sarah Palin for the reason why Obama won the election and McCain lost. Let's just be honest, McCain stunk. He is horrible. He's not even a good senator anymore. Please, Arizona, do us a favor. Get rid of him, please. I'm not a fan of McCain at all. But the biggest thing that happens is the collapse. What I think really turns the election for Obama is the October economy collapse. What happens is, and this is some of conspiracy theory, is what happens is all of a sudden $500 billion starts being taken out of our economy. And this $500 billion starts causing banks and so forth this collapse of some of our stock market and other things. Well, there's some ties that this was actually orchestrated by either China or Russia. That there's some congressmen out there. There's a really good interview that what happens again when we start talking about conspiracy theories and getting wrapped up in conspiracy theories. What happens though is Bush signs in an executive order that basically an economic stimulus package that will flood in out of our own money $500 billion to cover this. The problem with all of this stuff is this is again one of the reasons why we have the deficit. But this, if you want to learn more, that's an interesting one, that October economic collapse and how it really, people think it won Obama the election. The first 2 years, with Obama, Democrats control House, Senate, and the presidency. And again, they overreach. So, which is funny, after Obama was elected, I have a friend upstairs, I said, if Obama wins the election, I'm gonna run for office in 2010. He goes, really, why? I said, well, here's the first thing he's gonna do. He's gonna overreach. He's gonna try to do all these things, just like Bill Clinton did. He's gonna try to do all these things, and you're gonna see in 2010 that the Republicans will take control of the House and the Senate. Yep, Republicans took back control of the House, did not get full control of the Senate, but I think they started getting close to the majority and got the majority back. So that's pretty much it. So we're done with the book.
Wow.
No more book assignments. You can burn your book or sell it or do whatever. So next week, you have a test. I sent you guys this morning 2 perspective articles. Those are due in 2 weeks. So the last day of class, And don't forget, you're supposed to be working on your family tree. I know.
I totally forgot about that.
2 weeks, 2 weeks. I'll send you guys a reminder about the family tree.
How far does it have to go?
Yeah.
As far back as you want.
Cool.
And take advantage of this. Do it. This is your opportunity to be creative, okay? You don't have to, you do it however you want. That's not gonna cost you your grade, because I know you mentioned, well, it's not fair,
No, it's fair. I
Okay.
just don't want to do it.
I know.
So, this is gonna be interesting, my dad is documenting, how do you say that word?
Documenting.
Cat, for years, and then I have a relative, my mom's uncle, who has like a ton of genealogy, like 1500s. Do
Good.
I have to go back that far?
You go back as far as you can. Is that a good answer? So the thing is, the reason that you do this is I want you to look for somebody in your past, because I'll ask the question. What was something interesting about doing your family tree? What did you learn from it? Do you have anybody in there that's like some famous serial killer?
Oh my gosh, I do have a really funny story. Can I tell it now and not wait 2 weeks?
No, wait 2 weeks.
But it's so great.
Well,
It's my
good.
favorite story.
Then you'll have to
Oh,
save
I'm
it,
good at
because
that.
it's already 20 after, so we gotta, no, you'll
I
have to
have a
wait.
story to
I
say
really
too,
want
so
to.
it's all
It's
good.
so great.
Okay, write it down, write it down. No. So I want, if you come up with a neat story about your family. See, the goal here is that there is so much in today's life that everything tries to disconnect the current generation from the past. And so I want you to see that there is a huge connection to the past. You ever see the movie Jurassic Park? My favorite scene is they're eating dinner and they're talking and Malcolm goes, well, the problem with your science is you've built all your science on the backs of other people, but you never stopped to ask the question whether you should be doing this. So, same thing. When you understand where you come from and your connection into history, no matter how it is, you get a better appreciation for who you are, is what I believe. So like I've had this talk with my family. I'm French, Scottish, English, Irish, German, Italian, Polish, which allows me to make all kinds of ethnic jokes with all these things. So, did I ever tell you the one, why is it that all the Polish names end in the word ski? Like Dombrowski, Grogowski. It's because it was too hard to spell toboggan. My picking on my own Polish thing.
But my dad is Polish, and so every year, like on his birthday, we always have birthday dinners. And every year, he asks for he goes back and forth between the same things. He's either like, I either want, what's it called, pierogies,
Yeah.
or this other weird Polish thing that nobody likes in my house, and it's really funny. And then my mom is like, her parents were Sicilian or something like that, and so she doesn't say that we're Italian. She says that we're Sicilian because they
Right.
hated each other.
There is a
Mom,
difference.
It's not a big
There's
deal.
a difference.
So my brother, he was joking around, and he's like, I'm gonna make you a shirt for your birthday that says you're African Italian. I'm like, yes, and he hasn't, but I would have to because that's funny.
Did you say you did that for your dog's birthday?
My dad.
Oh, okay.
My dog. I wish I had a dog.
And then he said, and I'm like, pause. Pause.